What's up, guys? It's Disthunder from the Fwoosh, and I'm very pleased to bring you my review of the 112 Collective Steelbox Wolverine exclusive figure from Mezco Toys. These Steelbox figures are hopefully the first in a series of figures where Mezco revisits characters they've done previously in the 112 line. In Wolverine's case, that would be the Tiger Stripe version from about 6 years ago. And in doing so, make some changes, some upgrades, change some costume details, correct some mistakes, possibly, but most importantly, make a figure that was hard to get available once again. To be honest, when this first came up, I wasn't certain this was something I was going to need because I still really like the original Tiger Stripe version of Wolverine. Hell, I even like the original factory brown and yellow one. But when it became obvious this was going to become like an Ultimates version with 8 optional heads and a dozen hands and a sentinel stand and claw effects, it became clear there was no way in hell I could miss out on this figure. In a lot of ways, the costume is the same design philosophy as like the 6-inch plus brown costume suit that I reviewed recently, where they take it back to the basics, where it's a lot more comic-centric and comic-accurate design than the usual Mezco accented versions that we get. That also works out to mean a new body in this case, or at least mostly a new body. We have new arms, looks like a new upper body, new neck. Lower legs seem a little different, not a lot, maybe more sharing with Logan than Wolverine, and consequently he is a little bit shorter than the factory version. Accessories are going to be the biggest part of this discussion here, so I want to start off with the claw effects he comes with. He has 4 different versions. There's these 2 individual ones, and then there's a spikier one that for the life of me I couldn't get to stay on there. But the idea behind these is you plug the claws through these. Now granted, these will only work on the adamantium claws. And much like the punch effects that came with the Golden Age Batman and with the Holiday Gomez, these will give some comic-y action effects to your displays. Unlike those punch effects, though, once you get these set on the claws, I can actually make this work pretty good. And with the right kind of lighting and the right setting, I think they're pretty effective at conveying Wolverine's claws in motion, which is something that's damn near impossible to do in a static 6-inch figure. You might have noticed in the previous comparison shot and in this current front shot, he has a new belt as well. It actually has an option piece like the 6-inch plus where you can put the red X belt buckle on there or the classic gold belt buckle, depending on what era you want to convey. Here's the large slash X effect piece, which goes on to both claws in kind of a pull down or a pull up fashion. With a little bit of lighting, it is very impressive, though a little hard to get balanced on there. And speaking of lighting, here is the unexpectedly intimidating Sentinel display base that features a removable optic as well as a light-up eye and chest piece, as well as the flickering and the hollowed-out eye on the right side. This thing has some really impressive paint and sculpt work that's really hard to see unless you have it in person. I didn't think I'd actually need to keep this, but I'm putting this with my Sentinel display. To put it simply, I think this Wolverine has enough heads and hands that you can really convey almost any Wolverine situation or attitude if you mix and match enough parts. One of the more subtle examples that I hadn't even occurred to me is his right side pointing finger. I love this stupid thing, and I love mixing it with different heads in different circumstances. For example, we have here what I think would be considered the more modern looking head sculpt, and then he also comes with a more subdued, kind of a John Byrne head sculpt as well. You Marvel Legends guys might remember the Legendary Riders Toy Biz figure. That's what this head reminds me of, and I think it's my favorite of the unmasked heads. Either head, of course, will go with the cowl down piece that goes over the neck that has the mask hanging on his back between his shoulders. Speaking of masks, I was not expecting to like these 2 first appearance heads nearly as much as I do. These are the sleeper hits of the box, in my opinion. There was a painstaking amount of attention to detail done, like on those pencil lines for the whiskers around the face opening and the exposed eyes and the little subtle black lines along the top of the mask ears. A lot of work went into these 2 heads, and they have a lot cooler look than I think they have any right to. This is also how the figure comes packaged, with this second option for a belt, this black and red belt. Kind of has an astonishing vibe to it. Now, for a more accurate first appearance look, you would obviously want to do the red belt with the gold buckle, but I like how this red and black looks with the first appearance mask. I see what they were going for. It has a kind of streamlined classic look to it, even though it's not as accurate as it could be. The beauty is you have the option to do it whichever way you like. Here's a little more detail on those heads. Now you have 4 modern heads, 2 first appearance heads, and then 2 unmasked heads to choose from. The one that I think is the more modern, the more unkempt one, has a similarity to the original unmasked one that came with the first appearance Wolverine, but it is a new sculpt as well. And then you'll notice on these new modern ones, the wings on the side of the mask are a lot bigger, or the ears. I guess they're ears, aren't they? And that changes the profile of the figure quite a bit. It's almost kind of a Marvel vs. Capcom look, or maybe Jim Lee, but it feels more anime to me than even Jim Lee stuff does. And in case you're wondering, sadly, they aren't compatible with each other, but here's how they look if you want to get a little crazy with it and mix and match. The problem is the neck peg on the original figure is a lot bigger. But size-wise, here's the original tiger stripe on the left, and then the angry and then the yelling head of the two modern versions on the right. You guys know I rarely talk about variant hands in my reviews, but these guys really outdid themselves this time. So you've got the fist, the pointing finger hand I mentioned, a couple of relaxed grip options, and then 2 sets of adamantium, open and closed hand, and bone claws. I can't believe we finally got bone claws for a Mezco figure. I really can't stress enough what a cool little addition that is. That means this box set Wolverine can carry across like 30 years of continuity. He goes from like Len Wein to Jim Lee to Joe Mad and Pat Lee, although I don't think we really talk about that anymore, do we? But it's almost insane how comfortable this figure looks like in a nice 90s setting here with a Jim Lee Cyclops and his bone claws out. But then if you get tired of it, you switch the head and the belt and the claws and you haven't beaten up the Hulk again. That's like 1991 to 1974 in 4-part swaps. That's insane. Now I mentioned there's some new arms and maybe some new body pieces here and there, but as far as articulation go, this is nothing different than what you're used to with a 112 Wolverine. We have new boots with some good ankle swivel. They don't have a boot swivel though. You'll find the hip range, the up and the out are just as good as the previous figures, and the knee joint might even get a little bit better thanks to that new boot design. When it comes to the torso and the upper body, it's about what you'd expect. It's pretty similar to how it has been. I feel like the forward range is a bit of an improvement over the previous figure, and then that thoracic swivel as we're used to. Now when it comes to these shoulder pads though, they did redesign this. They are still on a hinge like the previous versions were, but these seem to work just a hell of a lot better. They stay on better, they seem to move with the shoulder more properly. You eagle-eyed bastards noticed I glued the other ones on my tiger stripe. That won't be necessary here. But that means these new arms are not restricted in any way. You've got the same kind of ball joint wrist swivel that we're used to and neck peg system. All pretty much the same, just improved. So my other hobbies, where we talk about guns and knives and gear and stuff, we talk about a term, philosophy of use. The idea of that is when you're buying a particular item, you try to figure out how many gaps it's going to fill, how many jobs it can take on, and how realistic it is for it to do what you want it to do versus what you need it to do. Knowing that most times in gear and guns and stuff, the one-size-fits-all thing is a fallacy. So when it comes to recommending this figure, I'm going to recommend it from a philosophy of use standpoint because this is a rarity. This figure, I'm going to go ahead and coin a term here. I'm going to call it a multi-generational Wolverine figure. We so rarely get figures that can carry out multiple looks in one package, and especially not seamlessly. And that makes this Wolverine truly unique and something really special. I mean, where you can pack 6-7 different styles and eras in one box with a mix of hands and heads and a couple of belts. So on that premise alone, that makes this Wolverine a must-own if you're a 112 guy or an X-Men guy, especially if you're a Wolverine guy. And maybe just if you're an action figure guy in general. So under the terms of philosophy of use, this is a very useful figure and you very much should get one. And I'm very thankful to Mezco Toys for making it and helping me get mine. And hopefully you're in the process of either waiting on yours to get delivered or you're tracking one down because you won't regret it. Thanks for watching. Hope it was useful, and we'll talk again in the next one soon.